Hello, everybody, and welcome to Conversations with Vegan Women Leaders. I'm your host, Katrina Fox, and today I'm joined by a wonderful animal activist and author, Catherine Kelaher. Catherine is the founder, of New South Wales Hen Rescue, a charity that liberates, rehabilitates and rehomes hens and other animals from factory farms in Australia. Catherine was born and raised in England, like myself, and she studied English Lit and creative writing at university. She moved to Sydney in 2006, and she's been rescuing animals ever since. And I believe she moved to Sydney to marry what she calls her Aussie hunk, Dave. So hello, Dave. Catherine, as I mentioned, is also an author. She's written 2 books, Amanda the Teen Activist, and her most recent title, Saving Animals, A Future Activist's Guide. Catherine, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. I'm really looking forward to speaking with you, Catherine. I know you and I have known one another over the years, but you've got such an amazing story, and I know we've got some really juicy talking points today. So let's dig in. First of all, so you started New South Wales Hen Rescue in 2010, I believe, so just over a decade ago. Why hens?
So back then I was a bit of a newer vegan, and I was going to animal liberation meetings on the Central Coast where I was living. So I was kind of dipping my toes into animal activism and trying to find my people. And we went to one meeting there, and we were looking at the meetings. We'd always start by having a flick through the local paper and see if there's any issues that affected the local area. And there was this article about a local farmer who was an egg farmer, a battery farmer, and he was going to be changing to free range. To intensive free range. He had this big puff piece in the paper about this family business over the years, and the photo was him individually feeding the caged hens. And I just had in my head, well, he's getting such good credit for this. What's happening to the girls who are in the cages right now? Will they be, and we all know there's massive problems with free range too, but would they be put into the free range system, or would they be killed? We then proceeded to watch Peaceful Kingdom, the documentary, straight after this chat that we had at the beginning. And it's such a powerful film. This was the original one. They've since remade it, but the original, it looks dated now, but it's still so powerful. I'd recommend anyone watch it. It's what made my Aussie hunk, David, go vegan. That after he came with me to that meeting and he went vegan, and me, it prompted me to start the rescue, because there's this such powerful footage of, yes, some of the horrible stuff that happens to animals, but then juxtaposed with rescue. And so you'd have these hens in cages or in horrible situations. And then I remember Moby's song, Why Does My Heart Feel So Bad? And as that played, you see rescuers come out and with these hens and take them to sanctuary. And I guess because we just read that article, and I just thought, I need to do something more. Being vegan is so important, but that's not enough. I need to do something more. So the next day I called up that egg farm and I said to him exactly what I said, like, what's going to happen to the girls that are there? And he said, they're going to go to heaven. They're going to go to the land of God. That was his word.
Wow.
And then I asked if I could maybe take some of them, and he said he could not understand it. He kept saying to me, but you still need to feed them even though they're old. You're still, if you want them to live, you're going to have to feed them. I was like, yeah, I know. I was trying to get this happening, and in the end, after a lot of back and forth, he agreed. And that was my first time in a battery farm and rescuing 6 beautiful girls. As soon as I realized that I could do that, I was then back for 10 when I found a home. And then the next time was 350.
Oh, wow.
And the problem with that was at the end of it, he said, okay, so what are you going to pay me for them? And I said, well, I'm not. Because, they were going to be killed. And he said, well, how am I going to go on holiday? And I said, but what's the holiday for the hens? Anyway, at that point, I realized that wasn't really a way forward for me to continue trying to work with the farmers. So I kind of switched my method. However, it was so important in the beginning to have that experience of being able to go in to see it from the farmer's side and to get those first gorgeous girls out. And from there, we just continued. So that was the start of everything.
That's amazing. I love that. I didn't know that origin stories. That's amazing. Now, I know that you've mentioned you kind of switched tactics, and I know you talk about an old, what do you call it, an ethos of good old fashioned animal liberation. So tell us a bit about how it works in terms of, you get the hens, and then I believe you rehome some of them, and then those that can't be rehomed, you care for yourself. Is that right?
Yes. So the thing, I guess it's always appealed to me, and I think maybe a lot of people who are animal rights activists can relate, is just those kind of 80s and 90s images of women coming out of the places of abuse holding animals that they have liberated, that are out there, and they're not asking for permission. They're not saying, oh, we'll only do it if we can get you to say yes, Mr. Farmer. The thing is, we're saying what they're doing is so terrible. And I realize that this is the whole of society. It's not, doesn't just come down to the one person, but the act of saving them shouldn't be seen as a bad thing, even though it may be officially illegal. So we're trying to follow the moral right instead of what is perhaps legally right, because it's so outdated that these animals should be suffering like this. So with that in mind, with people like Patty Mark in mind and Linda Stoner, who have done this previously.
Just for our international audience, so Patty and Linda are the founders of Animal Liberation and Animal Liberation Victoria, and they are incredible activists who have been doing this for decades and are amazing. Yeah.
Oh, yes, I totally agree. And with that in mind, because I just love all of their history as well, is that I just wanted to do that. I wanted to get in there and get some girls out. And so that's kind of what we do. We go in and don't damage anything, but just see these girls or other animals suffering and take them out. And from that first moment where as soon as I put my hand on their feathers, and that's it. Like if I wasn't sure who I was taking and I accidentally brushed my hand against someone, okay, it's you. I'm not, that has to be the case now. As soon as I do that, that's it. They're safe. And I even say it to them quite often. I'll say, you're safe now. That's it. All that suffering's done. Because even if they're so sick that they're going to have to live life as a special needs hen, or even in rare cases, have only a couple of days of freedom, then be put to sleep because of such horrible suffering, they will only receive love and care. And we really do everything possible with vet to make sure that happens. And then carry them gently out, and then they have their first ever straw. That's it, their first straw, because they've been on this wire. Even in a free range system, they've been on either like mats with holes in it or just not very nice surfaces. And now all of a sudden they're on straw, and you'll actually hear them once they're put into the carrier making these sweet little trills, like a little purr, which I didn't even realize hens did before I started this.
Oh,
and
that's lovely.
You'll hear this little scratch, as they're scratching in the straw. So that's kind of how it works now. Of course, if somebody contacts me and says, look, I'm going to kill these hens unless you take them, then I'm always open to taking animals that were in these horrible situations. I have a lot of girls who've been surrendered to me, but generally that's what the Hen Rescue is about. Yeah.
Brilliant. Love it. Now, I know you've had some challenges over the years because I know you've worked part-time jobs at supermarket, to fund it. This is all voluntary, it's self-funded. And I believe you've even had the extra challenge that until recently, I believe anyway, you've been doing all this in rented accommodation. And I know that, people that have just like one cat or one dog can find it hard, or a guinea pig, in rented accommodation. So I can only imagine some of the challenges you've had. Can you talk us through a little bit of that, like some of those challenges and how you've managed to handle them over the years?
Yeah, I think a big part of being able to do it was me saying, okay, I'm just going to do what I can. I'm not going to be able to have an Edgar's Mission sanctuary, or I guess for the American viewers, a farm sanctuary, but I can still do something. And that was part of, hens chickens are one of the most abused animals in the world, and I wanted to help them, but also they're small and easier to care for in rentals than, say, pigs. So that was part of the decision too. And so we lived in suburban rentals, and we couldn't really move out rurally because my husband David, who kind of he's the breadwinner, because my jobs are kind of reception jobs, those kind of things. And even from my temp work, we had to be near enough to the city to get there. And then we've just gone to what slightly more suitable rentals, but they were always had the same problem. So whenever somebody comes for an inspection, we'd always have more animals than they thought. So off we'd go to a friendly neighbour's house with a lot of the animals who'd have this mad week of cleaning. And it was just so difficult. And of course, many people want to surrender roosters because roosters crow, and people just keep on hatching them in the city, and yet they don't have homes for them. They haven't thought that through at all. So I would take them sometimes because they'd say they would kill them otherwise, and I'd have them in the bathroom or places where the neighbours aren't going to complain. So there were these kind of issues. Also, when you're looking for a pet-friendly, companion animal-friendly home for rentals, you'll often find you end up with somewhere that is about to be knocked down. So you might get a year or two, and the reason that they were okay with animals is because they were going to knock it down anyway. So we had that a few times. We ended up moving. It was actually since I moved to Australia, and I didn't start the hen rescue straight away, but in 2006, we moved 13 times in different rentals.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's stressful. And especially, I mean, that's stressful for anyone, like just with people moving, never mind with all the hens. And again, they're not the easiest. Like if with dogs, it's a little bit easier to kind of move them. They don't might get, I mean, that is big. Wow.
And we have, over the years, we've also taken in a number of other animals. So we have a rabbit from the meat industry, and then 2 stray rabbits. We have guinea pigs from testing lab, and quails and parrots. So
oh my gosh.
we have like a lot of rescued animal family members, and it was just getting to the point where it was just almost unsustainable. So I thought, I know this is the purpose of my life, like what I've chosen to do, what I want to do, but it's just not fitting with what I've got, my facilities and where I'm living. And that's why last year, when we got another notice that we would have to move on because they were selling the house, we thought we need to change something here, and we need to strive to get a permanent location for the hen rescue.
And I believe that you ran a crowdfunder earlier this year to raise funds towards that, and I believe that's still going. So how did that go? Where are you now? I believe you're in a rural property now, so you've got your hen haven, I believe. So just tell us a little bit about that.
So the good news is the Hen Haven, which is what I called it on Chuff, Project Hen Haven, is underway, under construction. So all of the permanent family members have got a safe home, a lovely place to live, and meanwhile building the battery hen foster enclosure, which should be ready in a month. So it's all coming together. But it was not an easy journey to get here. So I've seen some other sanctuaries do some crowdfunders that have gone to very high numbers, like 150,000 for their, fencing and things like that. So I looked into how much we would need for a deposit for a place, and it would be more rural. But the good thing was that now, well, it sounds awful to say, it's not good, but with COVID, my husband's been working from home. So it enabled us we still had to be so he could get to the city, but it meant that we didn't have to be there to go every day. And so we could be more like up to 3 hours deposit we would need. And we ended up, it was $150,000. So it's a huge fundraiser for a little charity. And we started on it, and it seemed impossible. And I set, a big 3-month, it was going over 3 months to start with. It was actually, I started it in July last year. So I was nice and organised for it. And I did a big sponsored hike of 67 kilometres in a day as one of the
Wow.
fundraisers on the Great North Walk, which is this ragged terrain. Oh my gosh, it was so hard, and I'm no athlete, and it was slow, but it was still the money. It was trickling in, you know. And I relied a lot on, like, I had to do Facebook ads and I had to do some serious promotion of it. And I did see at some point that we probably weren't going to reach the target. And I said to myself and to the people who were funding that if I couldn't get it together by December, then, and I knew we had to leave in March in the house, then I would have to shut the hen rescue, that I didn't want to do it. And all the animals would be cared for life that we had. But I couldn't keep taking in animals in this situation. And when I saw that we weren't going to get there, I did just keep pushing. I extended it to infinity, so it's still open. So, you know, it's you can do that with the crowdfunder. So, you know, I tried different perks, which you can do with crowdfunding, where you get like a nice enamel pin or something, or you get an enclosure named after you. I tried different Facebook ads. I tried different fundraisers, and we did get it in the end. So to about 2/3 of the total. I think it was about $90,000, which is incredible. I mean, this is from a charity where we usually we're pleased if we get $1,000 from a fundraiser, you know. And so I just felt like I can't, just because I don't have enough for a deposit, because it was kind of like the minimum we could do to get it. I have to find a way of keeping going. And this lady, Hilda, who'd adopted this beautiful rooster, Oliver, from me, who was rescued from the meat industry, called me, and she said that we could, if we wanted to, come and live on her property in Berrima, which is in the Southern Highlands, about an hour and a half from Sydney south. And the rent would be, so it would be rented, but the difference is she is an animal rescuer. And she has 5 acres, and she has a little cottage, like a little small tiny cottage, and the rent would only be $200 a week as opposed to $650 in around Sydney. And I was still at that point striving to buy somewhere, but when I looked around, I found it wasn't possible for the deposit that we had. I just threw myself into this project, and we secured a 5-year lease to start with, which we've never had before. And we're allowed to build enclosures. We're allowed to have all the animals in the house that we want. Like, she sees me bringing, you know, chickens up into the house if they're not feeling well or something like that. She encourages me, in fact. And it's just so different than what I thought, but it's worked out brilliantly. And now, rather than having to apply for grants and all of this stuff to build the enclosures, we were able to use the money or part of the money to build these fantastic fox-proof, hawk-proof enclosures, which are, rather than being like cages, they're like gardens, enclosed gardens. So it's kind of worked out really nicely. And now we've got this lovely lady who lives on the same property. So, and all of her cats. So she has 17 rescued cats. So it's worked out differently than I thought. But I'm so glad that
sometimes you just don't know. Yeah, sometimes you just don't know. Like, you wanted something and you put it out there, and it didn't come in exactly the way you wanted to, but it still came in a different way. So I love that. It sounds like you've got an animal angel, which I think is wonderful. I love that. So Catherine, as an animal activist, obviously, you know, you've seen a lot of suffering, and particularly, you know, because you're going into these hellholes. But I think you believe you've also experienced, you know, some difficult times with family. And I know you mentioned when you got in touch with me in 2011, you cared for your mother for a year, you know, through her terminal cancer. And just last year, you lost your sister to COVID. Can you talk us through what impact those losses have had on you?
Yes. So when I went back to England for a month in 2000 and the end of 2010, and the idea was to celebrate actually my mum's remission from breast cancer, and to have a month where we just, did a good old catch up. And when I got there, it was so wonderful to see her, because she was like, one of those mums who's like a best friend. And she did start having dizzy spells, and she got it checked whilst I was there. And the cancer had actually spread to her brain, and it was terminal. So I extended my trip because she would need care. And so I just stayed for that year until she passed away a year later, exactly to the day a year later. And it was a very intense experience, as you can imagine, because with brain, even though it stemmed from breast cancer, with brain issues, it affects things like personality and abilities to do everything, but still my lovely mum, So, the way that affected me is I needed a way to escape the everyday kind of trauma. And so there were two things I did. One, Zumba. 5 times a week at my local leisure centre, which was so much fun. It was ridiculous.
I love Zumba. I'm with you. I love it.
It was so fun. So that started my Zumba addiction. And then the other thing, and sometimes like she really wouldn't want me to leave, so I wouldn't, like with Zumba. I know it's only an hour a day, but so there was even that. But something I always could do was read. And I started reading From Dusk Till Dawn, which was written by Keith Mann, who was an ALF activist. And this is kind of in the 80s, 90s time, and he spoke about his own story. It's this huge, giant book. I recommend anybody to read it. And I spent my spare time just reading through it, because I just started the Hen Rescue. And I'd had only about 3 months where I saved those 350 girls, rehomed them, and then immediately went to England for what was meant to be a month. So I still had in my head, I need to do this. Like, I've got this desperate urge to help animals, and I couldn't. I had to prioritize my mum. And I would read this book, and it just is. I said to my brother, I remember at the time, when I get back, this is going to be my life. I'm going to be dedicating this to animals. I have to do something to help them. And I even remember my mum, who was a meat eater. She saw the cover of the book, which is an activist holding baby Britches the monkey, who was liberated from a lab, and he had his eyes sewn shut for an experiment, and they'd undone the stitches, and my mum was so angry about it, about the fact this was done in the first place. And she goes, "Well, how do I get involved in this? They're not gonna throw a woman with terminal cancer into jail, are they?" And it was like the first time she was just so inspired by this image. Unfortunately, her symptoms progressed before she could become an ALF activist. But it was just that kind of, all the time I just was thinking about it. And when I got back, I threw myself into it. And a friend of mine who'd helped me start the Hen Rescue, Sharon, who was at the same meeting, she had met some great people in the meantime, who from Animal Liberation, and she introduced me to them, and we got to learn from older people who had been doing this for a long time. And it was, the whole time, I miss Mum so much. I still think of her every day, and I just thought, this is what she'd want me to do too, and I'm going to do it. And then
I love that.
and then last year with COVID, my sister, my first book, Amanda the Teen Activist, was based on Amanda, my sister, and also for Amanda, my sister, because she adored books. And so Amanda had a mental and physical disability, quite severe, from when she was 6 years old. And she liked a lot of things that maybe someone of that age would like, even though she was much older. And when she'd see a book, she would just laugh so happily that she was about to be read to. And so I knew that I had like an audience who would love the book, no matter what I wrote. Just show the book. And it had a picture of, a girl with red hair on the front, and that's Amanda. So yeah, so there was that, and my brother read it to her, and she had a great reaction to it, and it actually went round the residential group home, and everyone got read it. So it's about a girl that rescues chickens, and kind of an imagining of what a naughty little 13-year-old Amanda, who could get around without, and had the ability to speak and everything, what she would get up to. But last year, where I found out that she had got COVID, and my dad and my brother called me, and it was almost like that was the moment that I had been told that it was almost like I'd been told she was going to die, because her condition is so serious and she has survived flus and things before, but I just thought, how on earth is she going to survive it when people with diabetes and stuff, which may not be as serious, sometimes can't survive it? And sure enough, she wasn't able to battle it. And I think that I always keep her in my mind and think, what would Amanda do? Because she was naughtier than me as a child. So even though I know this, because like from story, she was 4 years older than me, so I was only 2 or 3 when she got her disability. But I do know she was extra cheeky and naughty. And so I always think, what would she do? She wouldn't stand by and let these animals be abused. She had a beautiful reaction to animals too. Like if we gently placed a bunny on her lap, one of our rescued bunnies from when I lived in England, she would gently stroke, and I think she had a lovely attitude to animals. And I feel quite sure she would have been an activist who did more than me. So so she motivates me as well. And these very sad things that happen, I think I try to use them for something positive in a way for the animals. Yeah.
Oh, that's really beautiful. It's really beautiful, because that, both of those are pretty devastating. I really appreciate you sharing that, and that it motivates you to carry on. Now, you mentioned your book, so I wanted to talk to you about writing now. So you mentioned Amanda the Teen Activist, which is great. And of course, your latest book is Saving Animals, A Future Activist's Guide, which is a wonderful, I know I've seen it and read it, and it's a wonderful book to obviously, help equip young people to do all kinds of things to help animals, whether it's starting an animal kind of a club or at school, or, all kinds of things. I mean, it's a really comprehensive and wonderful book. And obviously, both of these books are really valuable for readers. What does writing bring for you? What does it do for you?
So writing is a bit like reading, I suppose, is a great way for me to escape some of the things I've seen, but also writing enables me to process some of the things. And it's not always that I'm just saying, oh, I mean, I do sometimes, to be honest, just journal what has happened, and that can help. But even creative writing, where I'm not writing exactly what happened to me, this is through another character, or I'm maybe telling the story of a young person who's active for animals, like in Saving Animals. There's something about it that just makes me feel so much better, so much more hopeful, because it can make you feel jaded going into these awful places where animals are just suffering in such large numbers, and you're only able to help, say, 20, out of 200,000. And yeah, by telling stories and by sharing the stories, I mean, when I spoke to these young people for the book, because Saving Animals is a mixture of tips and stories from young activists who between the ages of 6 and 24, who are doing things, who are taking action to change the world for animals. And then also some of my own stories from setting up the rescue and from my own activism. And just as I wrote down their stories, and I actually began to learn from them as well, I just started to feel hopeful, because sometimes I lose that, because you can feel, when, as much as I love animal rights history, when I look back, sometimes I think, gosh, people have been working so hard for so long. Like, this isn't something we've been doing in the last 5 years. And why has stuff not changed yet? But then I look at the stories of people, what they're doing now. And for this book, it was young people, but it could be anyone. And I think, okay, there's new things happening. There's things changing. There's there's differences being made to individual animals as well all the time, and it just makes me feel so much better. And with creative writing, with stories, that's just an escapism as well. So, I love that. I just love spending some time diving into it, and it feels like a treat for myself. Yeah.
I love that. And I say that, so they're both wonderful books, and we'll highly recommend you get them. They make a lovely gift. I think when I gave you a review, and I said it's actually also essential reading for parents and school teachers as well. So we'd definitely love to see both of those books get out there widely, and we'll put a link to those in the show notes page for this episode. So our final section, Catherine, is called a rapid fire section. So I'm going to ask you a question, and you just answer in like one sentence if you can. There might be a little exception, but as much as possible, they're kind of rapid fire answers. Okay. All right. Yeah. Now I know you've obviously done a lot of this, but what's the most courageous thing you've done?
Running into the Lakesland egg shed in the middle of the day to try and rescue hens who were dehydrating and starving to death, even though the farmer was on the property filming as I tried to do it.
Okay. All right. That's pretty courageous. What does leadership mean to you, and what style of leader do you believe you are?
Well, firstly, I'm a leader that has so much more to learn about leading. But leadership means to me in the style of my mother, like a loving, warm leadership, as opposed to wagging your finger and telling you off leadership. And that's the kind of leadership I've seen from people like Linda Stoner as well.
Absolutely. What do you love most about yourself?
I like that I am
fun. Love. I asked you a question. What do you love most about yourself?
I love that I'm fun. Like, I can dance in public, and I don't care. I don't drink, but I'll dance like I have been drinking, if you know what I mean. And
I do, really, and I'm with you there on that. I love it. What's one thing that most people don't know about you?
One thing most people don't know about me. Oh my gosh. That I can't answer questions on the spot. Oh gosh, what? I honestly can't think of anything. I'm an open book, No, I don't know. I don't have any party tricks.
Fair enough. Well, maybe we'll put it as the Zumba, that you like to Zumba. Even we revealed that earlier. I didn't know that about you, actually, until just before the call. I'm like, oh, yes, she loves Zumba. And what have been a couple of key lessons that you've learned, Catherine? So over the years, through your animal rights activism, through running the New South Wales Hen Rescue, what have been a couple of key lessons that you've learned that you would like to share with other vegan women leaders?
So I think that as far as whether you're running a business or a charity, I think that you're going to fail, unfortunately. And I think that failing with less risk and faster is a good thing, because then we can move on to other lessons. I've done so many things with fundraising that I failed at, and I've moved on from them. And I think that the Hen Haven has been a good example of that, and then adjusting to that, and also trying to keep a sense of humor throughout, because life really is too short to get caught up in the mundane little things.
I love that. And I love that. I think that's quite I know in entrepreneurial circles, that whole concept of fail fast is a really important one. It's like, don't get bogged down in it, don't freak out. Doesn't mean you have to give up everything. It's like, so I love that perspective that you've got, mitigate the risk as much as possible. But, sometimes you've got to just put yourself out there, or you've got to try things. And if you fail, like you say, just kind of get back and try something else. So I think that's wonderful. I think thank you so much for sharing your journey and the many different aspects of you. And I love the humor as well, I think, and particularly with something like what you're doing, you're going into these awful places. And I know, just to see that, time and again, and even seeing video footage, never mind actually going into these places, it's soul destroying, it's heartbreaking. So I love that you've got that counter of the Zumba and the dancing, like who cares, and the sense of humor. I love that you've shared that. I think you're,
you know what, Katrina, I need to tell you something that people don't know about me, and it's just come to me.
Good, great, go for it.
I watch Neighbours for every single day, and I've watched Neighbours since since it came out in 1980, whatever. When I started watching it with my mum, I do not miss an episode. For American people, this is an Australian soap. that people don't have very high regard for, as far as like it's directed. I have not missed an episode. Every day as part of my day, David the Aussie hunk, and I sit down and we watch Neighbours every day.
That is so funny. I'm glad you remembered something. I would not have pictured you watching that. To be honest, like my favourite, because we're both from the UK. I think for me the best Australian TV show of all time is Prisoner, also known as Prisoner Cell Block H, followed closely by Wentworth. But okay, whatever floats your boat, Neighbours it is. That works for you. Awesome. That's so funny. Thanks for sharing that, Catherine. It's been so lovely speaking with you. So if you want to follow Catherine and the work of the New South Wales Hen Rescue, you can go to henrescue.org. If you're watching this video, you can see that scrolling along the bottom of your screen. Or if you're listening to the audio version of this episode, that link will be on the show notes page, and there'll also be links to Amanda's books, which I highly recommend. Do check them out, buy them as gifts. If you're a teacher, give them out in schools. So Catherine, it's been a wonderful speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks everyone for tuning in, and bye for now.